Let's read that verse together. That's beautiful psalm we've been studying together. Psalm 23 together. The Lord is my shepherd. I have everything I need. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the right paths for His name's sake. Even when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for You are with me. 2,900 years ago, during the reign of King Ahab in Israel, the Syrian army ganged up with 32 other allies, and they came to war against Israel. They only had an army of 7,000 people, Israel, and they had an army much, much bigger than that. 32 allied kings came together. With 7,000 and all those people coming against them, they went to war against them. And God gave Israel victory. God gave Israel victory. Are you with me so far? Israel is the nation that God chose to bring Jesus into the world. They are situated in the Middle East. They are very much part of God's plan, and they are part of Jesus' history. So the following year, the Syrians came back to try to re-strategize, regroup. They pulled their armies and their admirals and everyone together and said, we got to make a new plan. 1 Kings 20:23 says, the Syrian military advisors went to their kings and explained, Israel's gods, don't miss this. Israel's gods are the gods of the that was the one we and next is, there you go. There you go. Good. Well done. May the Lord bless you. The Syrian military advisors went to their kings and said, Israel's gods are the gods of the hills. And last time we fought them in the hills. That's why. That's why they defeated us. But if we fight them in the valleys, where they are weak, we will defeat them there. Wow, kya plan hai. So they adjust their battle plan, redraw their battle plan, bring a huge force together. 1 Kings 20:27 in the Old Testament, giving the history of this, says, the Syrian forces covered the whole countryside, but the Israelites looked like two little flocks of goats. The whole countryside. They came at them all over the place. From all around they came at them, and they cornered these guys, and Israel was like two flocks of goats down there in the valley. Ah! Your God is the God of the hills maybe, but now we'll defeat you in the valley. See, when you take something straight against God, He takes it personally. And when the Bible says, but God, highlight that and go back to that. 1 Kings 20:28, God said, because the Syrians think that I am only the God of the hills and not the God of the valley. I'm going to give you victory over the huge army, so everyone will know that I am the Lord. I'm the Lord of what? I'm the Lord of the hills and the valleys. I'm the Lord of the hills and the valleys. I'm the Lord of the dark times and the bright times. I'm the Lord of the high times and the low times. I'm the Lord of the good times and the painful times. There is no situation that I am not God of. There is no place, no circumstance, no valley, no situation that I am not God of. There is never a situation in your life where you are in that place and you feel God has abandoned you. You can feel what you like, but the truth is, I am with you. I am with you. And I'm going to drive this home today. It's a presence issue. It's not a power issue. It's a presence issue. It's not a power issue. We don't want powerful Christians. We want Christians hanging on to a powerful God. That's what Christian really means. And most of the time, we don't live on the mountaintops. Most of the time, we live in the valleys. Most of life is done in the valleys. Even if you ride up to the northeast, which I've done several times in the last couple of years, or you ride up north, straight up north to the Mussoorie side, most of the ride is through the valleys. And then eventually you get to the mountaintop. But you don't stay on the mountaintop. You can't go from one mountaintop to another mountaintop without going. Mountaintops are great. I mean, the view is amazing. But there are few and far between. For the most part of your life, you will be in a valley. And valley is where life happens. And Jesus is saying, God is saying, I am God of the valleys as well. He's there with you. In the dark times, He's there with you. In the good times, He's there with you. In the painful times, the lost times, in the I think I know where I'm going times, He's there with you. So it's about presence, it's not about power. So you can be as weak as you want to be. As long as mommy is around, it's okay. As long as daddy's around, it's okay. Why? Because they are around. So you're not counting your strength when they are around. When they're not around, that's when you get all flustered and scared and defensive. And so if you're acting like a child without a parent, it's because the Lord is not my shepherd. So lifestyle will tell you whether God is really leading you. He leads His children. He leads His children. What do we know about valleys? Let me tell you three things real quick. Number one, valleys are inevitable. If you can spell it, write it. Valleys are inevitable, not inedible, inevitable. It's a part of life. Valleys are a part of life. And God's plan for your life involves both hills and valleys. Look at Deuteronomy 11:11. The promised land you are about to enter is a land of hills and valleys. 1 Peter 4:12 says, don't be surprised. Don't be surprised when you are tested by troubles and painful experiences as if something unusual is happening to you. Don't get so surprised. Life is going to have its good times and its bad times. Some of it you cause, some of it others cause, but that's what's going to be. That's what it's going to be. Number two, valleys happen to everyone. It is impartial. It is not only inevitable, it is also impartial. It happens to everyone. Psalm 34 verse 19. The good man does not escape all troubles. I'll wait for you to finish. This is a beautiful verse. I don't want you to miss this. The good man does not escape all troubles. He has them too. Has what? The troubles. Okay? Now, but the Lord helps him in each and every one of those troubles. It rains on the just and it rains on the unjust too. So they are number one, what? What is that? Inevitable. Number two, they are impartial. And number three, valleys are unpredictable. Valleys are unpredictable. Your life can go into valley like in seconds. You could be at the mountaintop and in the next moment you can be in a valley. Your day can change in a phone call. You could be having a great day after a great cup of coffee and you can get to 10 o'clock and then one phone call and everything goes south. One person just shows up. One memory just passes. And your day is gone for a 6. One memory. Arey, why did I remember that? Valley experiences. They are unpredictable. They'll come at any time. It's not going to wait for you. It's not going to wait until you manage all your life. Okay, God, I'm ready now. Let's do the valley thing. That time is never going to come. Don't even brag about tomorrow. Don't ever brag about tomorrow, since you don't know what the day will bring forth. Proverbs chapter 27 verse 1. How are we doing? Everybody's okay? Yeah, you getting this? Okay, we're talking about valleys, God's experience, God's presence, and three things about valleys that we do know. What do we know? Number one, they are inevitable. Number two, they are impartial. Number three, they are unpredictable. The Bible has several valleys, the names of valleys, significant memories and attachments to valleys. And I want to go through 4 or 5 or 6 of them for fun today, just to give you an idea of valley experiences. Valleys are also what we call a metaphor or a picture or analogy, however you want to take it, of life experiences. So let's look at a few. We find this valley in Genesis 14. It's called the Valley of Siddim. The Valley of Siddim. Genesis 14, 1 through 11. Then the 4 kings of Shinar, we're back in the nation of Israel, back in history, in the history of Israel, and we're in Genesis right up in the beginning. The 4 kings of Shinar, Elasar, Elam, and Goim went to war against the 5 kings of Sodom, Gomorrah, and 3 other cities. 5 kings joined forces in the valley of Siddim, okay, which is now the Dead Sea. Are you familiar with the Dead Sea? Yeah. For 12 years, they had been oppressed by other kingdoms. So in the 13th year, they rebelled, they revolted, and in the 14th year, their oppressor recruited his allies to team up and reconquer the land. So this is a back and forth struggle for power. So the 9 armies fought in the valley of Siddim, 4 versus 5 of them. They fought in the valley of Siddim. And here's what happened. Now in this valley, the valley was full of sticky tar pits. Sticky tar pits. There was those pits, there was tar, it was sticky, and when the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah tried to run away from the battle, does that sound familiar? Run away from the battle, not face the fight, not take it on, get afraid, get scared, whatever. When they tried to run away from the battle, they slipped and fell in the pits. The enemies came and they conquered them because they were stuck in a pit. The valley of Siddim is a valley of failure. The valley of Siddim is a valley of embarrassment. The valley of Siddim is a valley where you find yourself stuck in something and you're just not able to get out. And it's a public stuck. It's a public sin. It's a public failure. You find people at the mountaintops laughing their heads off at your failure, and you are overcome by your enemy because you are overcome by failure. One failure in your life somewhere in the past, one wrong decision you made, or one habit you started, you're stuck in it and you're not able to pull out, and the enemy has taken over you. It's crippled you. This valley was full of sticky tar pits, and when they tried to run away from the battle, they slipped and fell in the pits. How do you end up in a sticky valley? How do you end up in a valley? It's when you're running away from something. It's when you're running away from something. Whenever you're running away from something, you're always susceptible to fall. What's your valley? Is it a nightclub? Is it a hotel room while traveling? Is it a relationship? Is it a lifestyle? What's something that's embarrassing you and you're stuck in it? God is the God of that valley, and He can pull you out of that sticky tar pit. You ready for the next valley? Valley of Eshcol. The valley of Eshcol. Numbers 13. There's a book in the Bible called Numbers. Numbers 13. It's like the Excel sheet of the Bible. And this, you'll remember this story. This is where the promised land was being scouted out. Remember? And they sent 12 people. 2 names you would remember. Joshua and Noah. Joshua and? See, you're not sure. You're saying I'm wrong, but you're not sure. Joshua and Caleb. Very good. So 2 guys, and then the 10 guys we don't know. We don't know what their names are. Like the 12 apostles, right? You know the apostles? The 12 disciples? You know John and Matthew. No? Matthew is the first Bible one. And Luke was not a disciple. And Acts was not a disciple. And we don't know. We forget those guys. We remember faith. That's incredible. So you have the story where they are in the valley of Eshcol. The spies are sent. They came to the valley of Eshcol. The fruit was abundant, that they cut off a grape branch which had a giant cluster of grapes. Man, it was so big, large, and heavy. It took 2 guys to carry it on a pole. I'm not making this up. It's there. And they also brought samples of the beautiful pomegranates and figs and stuff like that. And 12 of them came back, 2 with a positive report, 2 with a negative report. 2 of them said, we can do it. We can take it on. It's an amazing place. Sounds like, looks like the promised land. 10 of them said, no. You want to know what they said? Look at this. Numbers 13, 27 to 33. This was the report to Moses. It is indeed a magnificent country. rich and fertile. Sounds like a CNN report. And here's some fruit. We got some samples. Here's some fruit as proof. But. Circle that but. Sometimes it's your but. But the people living there are powerful and stronger than we are. They looked like, they didn't say they were giants, they looked like giants to us. And in our own eyes, we felt as small as grasshoppers next to them. That's the valley of insecurity. Eshcol, the valley of insecurity. There's a lack of faith, there's a lack of doubt. Look at verse 33. In our own eyes, we felt small and we were like grasshoppers next to them. Eshcol is the valley of insecurity. It's the valley of fear. I either move ahead or I give up. I either move ahead in faith or I give up in fear. They parked it. They didn't move. They didn't move. And you see, listen to me carefully. God tests his people not for pass fail. God tests his people for faith. God tests his people for faith. So when he says, when you want to grow in your faith, God gives you something to grow on. He gives you a situation. He gives you a challenge. And when you apply faith, you go to the next level. And then he gives you another challenge. It's a training process. It's a training process. But instead of faith, if you apply fear, you stay stuck there. You stay there. You're stuck in the valley of fear. You're stuck in the valley of insecurity. And when you're in that valley, everything looks bigger. Everything looks bigger and better and greater, and you can never ever match up to anything. What is your Eshcol? What is your Eshcol? You need to face your fears. You need to take a risk. You need to retreat. Instead of retreat, you need to move forward in faith, not retreat in defeat, not give up, not turn back. Let me help you here. How do you know that this thing in your life, this challenge, this problem, this big thing that's been keeping you up all night or that you've been dreaming of, how do you know that this thing is a valley experience that you can conquer, that you can go through? It's your perspective. It's simple as this. Do you see it as an opportunity or do you see it as a hindrance, as a hurdle, as an obstacle? Because of this big thing in my life, whatever that big thing is, because of this thing, I can't be happy. I can't be joyful. I can't get along normally. I cannot. My whole life is on standstill. My whole life is in limbo right now. Oh, I can't do that. Oh, I can't be this. I can't go on. I can't dream. Whatever the case is, this big thing. What is this? I don't know what this is. What is that valley? What is this valley thing? What is this one big thing that's in your life that has become a hindrance rather than becoming a opportunity? Faith and fear basically see it that way. Fear says it's a hindrance. Faith says, let's see what God can do with this. Yeah? Let's see what God, the God of the mountains, the God who can move mountains, the God who moved the stone from the grave. Let's see what God can do with this problem. When you stand there and you look at your problem and you sing the song, it's not me facing my problems, it's my fears that need to face my God. When my fears need to face my God, I can rise above eagles. How do you see it? Do you see it as an opportunity? You say, if your God is the God of the valleys, he will be with you. And if your valley is an insecurity issue or a fear issue, he will help you through that. He will help you. The Christian life is a life of constant testimony of the victories of God, the small victories of God. Let me tell you something about us Christians. We're nothing. We are nothing but the grace of God. Everything about us is a statement of praise and anthem of glory. Oh, that's a bit pathetic. You don't believe in yourself. It's a bit of a, I don't know if I agree with that. Oh, your Jesus just makes you nothing. He wants to be everything and your Jesus just makes you nothing. No, he doesn't make you nothing. I become nothing. I become nothing. I'm willing to become nothing because I believe what Jesus said. So here's what Jesus said. Jesus said, I died for you, you die with me. I live through you, and when I come again, your life will be seen for all of its glory. Those who lose for my sake will be found. Those who lose their life for my sake I believe Jesus. I believe that what Jesus is saying is, I become nothing with the faith that I will be everything when He returns. I'm nothing just for a lifetime, but I'm everything for eternity. Are you getting the swap here? So I'm not nothing forever. I'm nothing for somebody. So that I can. That's where faith comes from. When you believe He's the God of the valleys, when you believe that this problem or that fear, He's willing to combat that with you. You become aware of His presence. The Christian life is a life of great awareness of the presence of God with you. It's not a self-confident kind of, I can take on the world kind of thing. Look at me and look at my faith. What is your Eshkol? Let's go to the third valley. The third valley is the valley of Elah. And you may not remember that word, but you definitely remember the story. Do you remember the story of David and Goliath? Yeah, which one was the giant? Goliath? Paka? All right. Just testing. It's a well-known valley. Well-known valley. 1 Samuel chapter 17 verses 2 and 4 verses 11 on your screen. Saul and the Israelites camped in the valley of Elah and drew up a battle plan to fight the Philistines. The Philistines and the Israelites each stood their ground, shouting and taunting each other from opposite hills. Listen to this. And the valley of Elah was between them. Do you get the picture? Do you get the picture? So you got the valley of Elah. Everybody looking here. We got the valley of Elah. You got the Philistines on one side. And you got the Israelites on the other side. Two nations constantly at war with each other. Even today, two nations. And then what they decided was all the armies were all over there, and they got the valley between them. And the giant Goliath had come down and he was taunting them. For many people, this valley is a relationship. It's the valley of conflict. It's the valley of conflict. And you're in a relationship with a loved one, with a colleague. You're in a relationship and you're at odds and there is conflict and nobody's ready to kill the giant that's between them in the valley. Nobody's ready to take the giant on. Nobody's ready to finish the giant. And there they were, both of them taunting each other. And then David shows up out of nowhere. And he says, don't worry about a thing, he told Saul. I'll go and fight the Philistine. One man against another man. I'll go fight the Philistine. It's the valley of conflict. When you're facing your giant. And your giant stands between you and the other brother. You and the other brother. Remember, Israelites and Palestinians, they're brothers. Or it could be a marriage. It could be a marriage that is this place where for so long there's been this valley that you don't think you're going to cross over. You don't think that you're going to figure this conflict out. Impossible, cannot be done. Yeah, you can't do it. Nobody said you can do it. We never said you were going to do it. But have you ever seen God do something that you can't do? The more God does that you can't do, the more your life becomes of what God does in your life that you can't do. And that's really unfair because then you get the credit for a lot of what God has actually done. They were terrified and deeply shaken. Terrified and deeply shaken. Verse 3, the Philistines occupied one hill and the Israelites another, the valley between them. Deal with that valley. Deal with that valley. Get rid of it. God is with you. Number 4, the fourth valley is the valley of Baca. You see this, read about this in Psalm 84. In Psalm 84. The Hebrew word for Baca is basically weep, to weep. To weep. It is derived from the root word to weep. It's the valley of weeping. It's the valley of sorrow. It was an arid valley, a dry wasteland that pilgrims had to go through. So as you come to Jerusalem from all over the place, it's part of the journey that you had to go through. Very significant when you think about it. Very significant. You had to go through the valley of weeping before you come to Zion. Before you come to Jerusalem, the temple. All right. That was the valley of Baca. Dry desert, unproductive wasteland. Nothing grows there. Joy has dried up. For a lot of people that they're in that valley. They're stuck in that valley. Nothing is happening in my life. Nothing is moving. Nothing is working out. I'm just there. I'm unproductive, I'm unhappy, and I'm sad. I'm sad. For some people, it's a place of weeping because of loss of loved ones. Loss of loved ones. It's the valley of pain, of loss of loved ones. Psalm 84 verse 5, 6 and 7 says, blessed are those whose strength comes from the Lord. Blessed are those whose strength comes from the Lord. Why? Why? Because as they pass through, underline that, as they pass through the valley of Baca, that's weeping, they make it a place of springs. Let's go slowly, English. They make it a place of, it doesn't become a place of springs. They make it a place of springs. And the autumn rain covers it with pools. They go from strength to strength, growing until each appears before God in Zion. That's the culmination of that journey as you go through the valley of Baca and you reach Zion, you reach Jerusalem, the temple, the place of worship. Weeping will always come before worship. Weeping must always come before worship. Why? Not that God wants you to be sad, but God wants you to be poor in spirit. He wants you to be meek in spirit. He wants you to humble yourself and repent, or He wants you to get right, or He wants you to receive His grace before your life can be a testimony of His worship. God, why do you keep taking me through these valley experiences? Because I want you to end up in Zion. Because I want you to end up in Zion. Growing until each appears before God in Zion. Verse 6, blessed are those whose strength comes from the Lord as they pass through. As they pass through. Baca is the valley of grief and barrenness. Let's wrap this up. Let's close this message. Let me give you 3 things to remember. 3 things to remember when you're going through a valley experience. No matter which your valley is, here's 3. I'll throw in a couple of other valleys as well in the middle. Number 1, remember I'm not alone, God is with me. Write it down. Remember I'm not alone, God is with me. Okay, let's go back to Psalm 23 verse 4. Psalm 23 verse 4. Remember, I'm not alone, God is with me. Psalm 23 verse 4 says, even, say it with me, even when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. 2 key words I want you to notice here. 2 key words. Number 1 is through, and the other one is you. Number 1 is through, and the other one is you. Even though I walk through, nobody stays in a valley. You're only going to go through it. Firstly, it is not permanent. It is temporary. It is temporary. Every valley is temporary. Eventually, you're going to land up on the mountaintop. God's promise is such. Number 1, it is temporary. You don't stay in the valley. Number 2, you're never alone, ever alone, never alone in the valley. For I am with you. For I am with you. Will you go through a valley experience? Yes, but never alone. Some of us think when we go through valleys of pain, of conflict, when we go through valleys of darkness and grief, we think it is those situations that God has abandoned us. We think we're in that because of some stupid decision or mistake we made. We think we're there because it is a punishment of some sort that we did something wrong. All of the above are wrong. Valleys are valleys are valleys. And God is with you. God is with you. Forgive me if the grace of this message, the good news of this message is too good for you to handle. God is always with you. There is only one person. I want you to know this. You are members of Covenant Life. I want you to know this. The word covenant. This is the cup of the new covenant that is in my blood. I want you to know this. There is only one person that God forsook. There's only one person that God forsook. For a few hours, as he tasted death, separation from God, forsaking of God for us. That is Jesus. And now that he has been forsaken for everything we have ever done, God will never, ever, ever forsake you. You can't sin enough for God to forsake you. Get over it. You can't run far enough for God to forsake you. He'll still find you there. It's a round globe, man. How far are you going to go? This message of grace is just too good to be true. That's why I keep inviting you to become a sheep of this great shepherd of the Lord Jesus Christ. What to remember when you're going through a valley? Number one, remember, I am not alone. I am not alone. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Shadow is an interesting thing, isn't it? Haven't we talked about this before? Shadows can frighten, but they can't harm you. Have you ever been run over by a truck? Can you remember? You would, wouldn't you? If you had been run over by a truck. Have you ever been run over by the shadow of a truck? In Delhi? What happened? Nothing. Once it was there and then it was gone. It was just gone. Shadow. Talk about that in just a bit. Shadows are very interesting things. You know the shadow is always bigger than the real thing? Shadow is always bigger than the real thing. And the fear is of the shadow, not even of the real thing. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Shadows can be scary. Shadows cut the light out. That's why you're scared. God is the light, and when you're cut off from His presence and you're cut off from His promises and from the sound of His voice and from the sight of His presence, you will be afraid. So though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will not fear, for you are with me. Shadows are always cast because of an object that's in between the light and the person seeing. In between the light and the person seeing. This thing is transparent, so that doesn't help the analogy. But if this was here and that was the light, and this comes between me and the light, let's say light is God, let's say I am me, and this comes between me and the light. The shadow of this situation, of this sin, of this circumstance will scare me. I live in the fear of this shadow. The problem is that it has come between me and God. Little science thing here. It's come between me and God. But if I turn it around and I look at the same thing in the light of God, I see the thing that casts the shadow on me, I see that thing in its real light. In the real light. Shadows are a funny thing. And we get scared of shadows. What happens when I go through those dark times? Job chapter 12 verse 22. God uncovers deep things out of darkness. God uncovers deep things out of darkness, and He brings into light the black gloom. Even the black gloom and the shadow of death, He brings things to light. God will take you through difficult times and grieving times and hurtful times, and He will do something so deep in you and give you such a deep perspective on life that you can only learn in those times of pain. Don't fight them. Don't fight suffering. Don't listen to the wrong gospel that says there is no pain, no place for pain in the life of the believer. How can you become like Christ without being in the fire of that crucible? How can you become pure without being purified? Suffering is there, pain is there, reality of death is there, but through it, God does some very powerful things. Only in the times of your greatest suffering have you learned some greatest lessons. When you go through the deep waters and the great troubles, I will be with you. When you go, why is He there with you? Why is He there with you? So that you don't fear. But more than so that you won't fear, that you learn that He is with you during times of troubles. Because you believe, your religion tells you, your philosophy tells you, the people around you tell you, the circumstances tell you, He's gone, He's quit, He's not there, He's not listening to you. No, He says, I'm with you. So that you learn that He will never leave you. If you can't see Him, it's because of this. It's because of this. Just take this out and you'll get with Him. That's what the God of our Bible, He says, I will be with you. When you go through rivers of difficulty, you will not drown. You will think you're drowning, you will feel you're drowning, but you will not drown. I got you covered. When you walk through the fire of oppression, you will not be burnt up. The flames will not consume you. Psalmist says in 73:28, he tells about his own confidence. As for me, God's presence is all I need. It's not about power, it's about presence. When God is not present with you, that's the only time to worry about. But then he says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. So we're saying psychologically that there's no situation in my life where I need to operate out of fear. I can always operate out of faith. I've made the sovereign Lord my shelter. Number two, remember, God has a good purpose for the valley in my life. He has a good purpose for the valley in my life. He's not going to waste a painful experience. He's not going to waste a hurtful experience. When people abandon you, when people say bad things about you, when people ruin your reputation, when people stab you in the back, it's all going to happen, but God's going to turn it around for you. He can make you a smarter, stronger person through that, not without that. We can even rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance. Endurance produces character. Character produces hope. And that hope, that kind of hope, does not disappoint us. Why? Because God has poured His love into our hearts. Look at what God says in Hosea 2:15. I will, you read it with me. You read it with me. I will transform the valley of trouble into a gateway of hope. That's another valley. I will turn that. How does God do that? No, He doesn't change the circumstances. He just does it by being there. Have you said to a loved one often, it was a tough time, but because you were with me, everything was okay. We say that just to be nice, actually. But with God, it's true. With God, it's true. I'm almost done. Remember, God has a good purpose. Hosea, I will transform. I will return your vineyards, and then troubled valley, we will become a hopeful valley. That's another verse. Colossians 1:11, God will strengthen you with His own great power so that you will not give up. He'll give you that strength. Number 3, remember the reward will last forever. Remember the reward will last forever. So whatever you go through that, if you go through it with Him, you get a reward forever. You get a reward forever. What is this? God trying to play some game here? No. He's saying that everything that comes out of the valley experience is eternal. Is eternal. So don't mock a valley experience. Don't run from it. For our present troubles are quite small and they won't last very long. Yet they are producing in us an eternal glory. An eternal glory. There's a whole lot that's happening in our life that we are fighting, that we are waiting off, that we are praying away. We're praying, Lord, Pastor, pray that this doesn't happen. Pray that doesn't happen. Okay, I'll pray. Then you get into heaven, and 1 minute after being in heaven, you're like, what? I should have gone through it. It was worth it. It was worth it. I want to tell you that. You will only hear it from this pulpit. You won't hear it from outside. When you're in heaven, the things that are going to qualify you to be there, the things that are going to make it worth getting to heaven, when you look back, it will not be certificates and accolades and cups, and it will not be the things you were great at. It will be the difficult times that you went through. Let's close with this. Psalm 107. Psalm 107. Some were living in gloom and darkness, like prisoners suffering in chains, because they had rebelled against the commands of the Almighty God and had rejected His instructions. They were worn out from hard work. Then in their trouble they called to the Lord, and He saved them from their distress. He brought them out of their gloom and darkness and broke their chains in pieces. They now must thank the Lord for His constant love and for the wonderful things He did for them. The wonderful things He did for them. When people come through difficult circumstances, they must thank God. Fill this out. Fill this out. Fill this out. You don't want to get up and talk about it? You don't want to say it to anybody? Fill it out. Express the goodness of God. Don't go through a series called the Living in the Goodness of God and then have nothing to say. Say it. Say it. And give me the permission to publish it. One last valley. Joel chapter 3 verse 14. Multitudes, yes, multitudes are in the valley of decision. They're in the valley of decision. For the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision. Some are in the valley of decision. And God will give you the wisdom to get through that valley as well. But the decision you make, the biggest decision you make, is to make that shepherd my shepherd. To make that shepherd my shepherd. That's the biggest decision you make. Because when you make that shepherd my shepherd, then you can say, I will not fear, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Because if you don't have him as your shepherd, he's not going to be with you, in which case you will fear, in which case you will act and respond on the basis of fear. The Lord is my shepherd. Verse 1, 2, and 3, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He restores. He, third person. Then he gets to verse 4, and then he says, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you. So he was talking to you about him, and then he turns to him, and he says, you are with me. Everything changes when he becomes you, when you are one-on-one with Jesus. Is he your shepherd? Is he your shepherd? None of this great stuff is yours unless he is the one giving it to you. Is he your shepherd? Can you make, out of all the decisions, important decisions in your life, can you make that decision the biggest, and even today's decision? There's a card that's been given to many of you. You may not even have it with you. But the first one says, I decide to follow Jesus. I decide to follow Jesus. And the beauty of that decision is that you can taste him and you can try him and see. And there are several other decisions, but make some decision today. With every head bowed and every eye closed. 2 hours from today, you'll forget how tired you are right now and how long this message is. 2 hours. But my brothers and sisters, for eternity, you will never forget the truths that you heard just now. With every head bowed and every closed, fill the card. Think about what you have been taught. Make a decision. Give to God your tithes and offerings. Just take a few minutes to wrap up your worship this morning in his presence. May the Lord bless you.